Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this month's cannabis industry meetup. Thank you for your patience in having it be rescheduled. We are super duper excited to have Zach Marshall here from Cannabis Risk Management. So he's going to tell you all about how to protect your assets and protect your employees and all the nuances to security in this very niche industry. So Zach, take it away. Oh, and wait, I have to say, Zach is also a former Navy SEAL, so he's automatically the coolest person in the room. So he wins every single time. So
I don't know if that's quite true. I think in the waiting room, my director of ops is there, Kurt, who is a special agent in the Department of Defense. So he's got some pretty cool street cred as well. Yeah, whoever is running it, I know he's in the waiting room. Is there anybody else in the waiting room still?
Ormond, anyone in the waiting room? I don't.
Nope, not at the present time.
Not right now. Ormond is our point person to let everyone into the waiting room. So.
All right, let me just check in with him. I want him to be here to be able to answer any questions as well.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Make sure I get the right link.
I'm going to pause recording and
Yep.
we'll do it again once your dude is here.
Yeah, he says he's in it, so I'm gonna try sending him a new link.
Dwayne?
Yeah. No, his name is Kurt Parker.
Oh, his name is Kurt. Okay.
All right, let me go back to sharing here. Hold on.
You're good.
Yeah, it's except now it's not. Now it's
Just
not going.
notice. It says we've locked the editor because. Oh no! Don't worry about that. Just go into slideshow mode.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, but it won't let me present.
Are you still sharing? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you are. Okay.
Okay, so every technical difficulty that can happen will. So let's just make
Murphy's
this full
Law.
screen, and I'll keep it in edit mode.
There. Oh, there. That's perfect. Right there.
Yeah, so hey everyone, I'm Zach Marshall. I'm the founder and CEO of Cannabis Security. This presentation is about cannabis risk management, and I guess I'll just jump into it. From my understanding, this is being recorded and that the audience is people who are looking to get the New York State licenses and open businesses from the different parts or different stages of the cannabis process. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right. So about Cannabis, so we build custom security solutions for businesses and clients, and each time those are custom. Our solutions are based on decades of experience in asset security and mobile security, investigations and advisory. What this means is that across our team, we've done everything from design the security for embassies in war-torn countries to protecting public board members who've been threatened for board meetings, to in helping with litigation support and fraud and wire fraud restitution. And so, yeah, sorry, my screen is still super weird. Let me.
That's okay. No worries.
All right, now I can actually see the presentation. All right, so the key thing here is we don't provide generic low quality minimum wage solutions. And I think it's important, or maybe the purpose of this presentation is to show you why you shouldn't be looking for low quality minimum check the box solutions. for protecting your cannabis business, because this is not a check in the box industry. This is an industry that has a ton of risk, and we have to look at how we can mitigate that risk. Whether you work with us or with any other company, it's most likely that nobody on this call will work with us. You're welcome to, but we definitely are on the higher end of things, and we work globally, not just in Rochester, New York. But we're happy to still help and get on a free phone call if you want to dive in anything from what we talk about today, or need some help just getting connected to other vendors that might be able to help you secure your people, your assets, and just mitigate that risk. And so on the call today, it's myself. Again, I'm the CEO and founder of Cannabis. I was a Navy SEAL for 10 years, and I've worked at 3 startups. This is actually a startup. Cannabis is a startup. We raised venture money because we're not just going after the high-end security market itself, but also the security market or labor market at large. And we're building a platform that allows, I guess, clients like the people on this call to skip the large national middlemen and get high-quality solutions without paying a 40 or 50% markup on that. And then Kurt, our director of operations, is on the call, and he joined Cannabis right out of the Department of State, where he's a special agent. Before that, he was a sniper for Army Special Forces, and before that, he was a Baltimore County police officer and was SWAT certified. So kind of across the 2 of us on this call, we have experience with a lot of different agencies and a lot of different types of security solutions all over the world. So disclaimer, this is not in any way legal counsel, and it shouldn't be thought of as legal counsel. We don't own a cannabis business in New York. We're not applying for licenses to do so. And so you'll have to go to other people for expertise on that. And don't take anything in this video as as more than just the beginning of a conversation. This is stuff that should pique your interest, and you definitely need to solve for your business, but this is just a quick basic overview. All right, so what are some of the risks to cannabis businesses? So I broke this into 5 different categories: theft, violent theft, harm, reputation, and compliance. And I'll just dive right in. So theft, in this case, I'm referring to when your products or cash are stolen without the use of force. This is often an insider threat where somebody takes money or diverts a cannabis product from where it's supposed to go, and it just kind of disappears. So we need to protect against that risk. The next is violent theft. This is like your robbery and burglary, where people are entering into the space that through force and then taking assets or cash by force. Here, there's always direct victims, even if it's just mentally distraught or mental trauma from the people who are threatened by the attacker or the criminal. So a story from Wharton Business School estimates that, or a study estimates that more than 50% of all cannabis dispensaries were robbed or burglarized in 2021. So if you think of that, that's a ton of crime that is attacking this industry. Hopefully that subsides, but upfront, a lot of that can be mitigated by using good security practices and systems. And again, not just checking the box.
Zach, if I can ask a quick question, sorry if I'm getting ahead of you, but
No,
so
go ahead.
in terms of like the violent theft, is that something that you've noticed that local police forces are paying attention to, or are they just like, oh, you're in a high risk business,
Yeah, so it's been pretty clear in other states. I don't really know how it's all going to play out for non-medical marijuana. I don't know what the term is here in New York, but as these new dispensaries open,
adult recreational.
Yeah, so for adult recreational, I don't know how it's going to play out in New York, but it's been pretty clear in other states that police and law enforcement are the crisis response, not crisis prevention. And it's not their role and it's not their job to come protect your facility before something happens. So if you see off-duty police officers, or even sometimes uniformed police officers at a distillery or at a building or facility in other states or even in New York, there's a good chance that that facility is paying the department to provide that protection. And those are like extra hours for those police officers. So I do think that like across the board, police are responding pretty quickly to violent crime related to these dispensaries, and part of that is because the business owners are reporting and they do care. And maybe when we're not on a recording, I can talk a little bit about how some business owners in other states have also used private security as an in-between to cover the gap between law enforcement and protecting their assets. But there's some gray area there.
Cool.
Yeah. Altogether, I do trust our police force, and I think that I think they're going to be on pretty high alert for this stuff, and having a good relationship between the business owner and the department, which is something you can set up before you even open your doors, is huge. If you're ready to work with them and you communicate with them and you know who to call and how to report an incident and how to work with them through the incident, that's going to show a lot of alignment with them as well. All right, so there's theft, violent theft. The next is actual harm. And so this takes, you can put theft and violent theft into something that's critical to your business. Harm is catastrophic, right? So if your employee or yourself is mentally or physically harmed in the line of working at a store, like that's not acceptable. And it's a risk that you have to mitigate at a minimum. Reputation is another risk where crime is going to hurt your reputation in the community, and it's going to hurt your brand, especially in an industry that's becoming more and more legitimate. Clients want to see legitimate stores, and they want to see that things are being done right. An example of where that doesn't work, I won't name it, but one of the bars right downtown in one of the new builds right by the Liberty Pole just lost their license to be open because they weren't compliant, right? They weren't using the right, they had the incorrect permit for what they were doing. And that totally wrecks that entire business. That business it'll take 2 years for them to recover. And the same thing can happen if you get broken into a bunch of times in a row. Your clients are going to stop going, your brand's going to go down, the newspapers are going to pick it up. It's just something you want to protect against. And then I guess I just said it, but the next big risk is compliance itself. If you're non-compliant or uncompliant, there's a really good chance you're going to get shut down. You're going to get inspected, you're going to get audited. And part of that is because it's very likely that some amount of crime does show up at your door, whether or not you've prevented damage or prevented loss via security systems. And anytime that gets reported, you're going to end up with some kind of inspection or audit of your systems, of the products that you have on hand, how they're being stored, and so on. So you have to stay compliant the whole time. And the wording there is you need to be able to prevent and detect diversion, theft, or loss of any marijuana product. And then Jennifer, for the people on the call, what types of businesses are they building?
We've got delivery. The micro business enterprise is what's the only license type that allows you to fully verticalize in terms of growing, processing, selling. And I imagine a lot of the people that will be watching on our YouTube channel are going to be cultivation, processing, and bakery. Yeah, bakery is going to fall, Letitia. Yeah, bakery is going to fall under processing because anytime you're putting cannabis into an edible product, that's going to fall into processing. But so yeah, we've got retail dispensaries, processing, micro business, and cultivation. And transportation as well.
So pretty much all of them. Yeah, I forgot they're going to watch it on YouTube as well. So yeah, so pretty much across all the stages. I don't know that this is a comprehensive list here, but I put the list on, and a good piece here is that each stage has different risks and different security risks that have to be dealt with. And there's different professionals and different consultants and advisors that you should be going to solve these different things. And you should also be talking to other companies in other states to get advice from them and what they've done well, especially from some of the states that have been doing this for a few years now, and they've kind of worked out all the kinks. Yeah, so anytime you look at security and how you're gonna prevent loss, you have to look at what the requirements are versus what best practices can be. And the history of security industry is really led to this world where requirements are king, as far as like corporations are concerned. So it's a check in the box industry where there's a bunch of requirements that are written out. As long as you meet those requirements, you meet your liability requirements for insurance for your employees. But that's really not enough when we look at the risks we talked about earlier. Just meeting the bare minimum, let's say the minimum says, you know, whatever DPI camera, let's say a 2 megapixel camera. Like if you go buy a camera from Best Buy and like hang it up in the corner and you meet the legal requirement, that doesn't mean that you're going to be providing the best footage, let's say, to the police officers and the agencies that are trying to prosecute crime that happen on your facility. Same thing that if you meet the requirements for 2 drivers in the delivery vehicle, but one of them, maybe isn't qualified to drive the vehicle or to de-escalate a situation, you can end up with the bad outcome of losing your product and then having to deal with all the ramifications there. So there's definitely a difference between, I'm going to now call it minimum requirements and best practices. And a lot of that just comes from misaligned incentives, right? So the way the security industry works, you go to some of these big named corporations, they're all over Rochester. And the first thing they do as a corporation is take a large cut off of the top. And that large cut then means that the labor is pretty well underpaid. And with underpaid labor, you have a ton of churn and there's very little loyalty. And so there's no alignment of incentives between the person who's doing the job and your business's outcome. They're aligned pretty much to meet the liability requirements, which is honestly what they're getting paid for. And so best practices mean that if you do work with one of those large companies, you need to negotiate and fight through that contract to make sure that you're getting high quality security guards and more advanced security guards for an industry like cannabis, especially for transportation of cash and transportation of product. And then I would add as well that if you have low quality when I say low quality, I mean underskilled or underexperienced guards mixed with a personality that doesn't fit well with the industry and the professionalism and legitimacy we're trying to provide it, you're going to have, it's not going to provide the disincentive for the criminal to come in and create a problem. And this really all just, go ahead.
Sorry. You may not know the answer to this, but you talked about like minimum requirements versus best practice. Mm-hmm. Do you know, and if you don't, it's fine. Do you know if you are looking at, because obviously insurance is a huge cost to these types of businesses. Do you know if they do more than the minimum requirements if their insurance may be less?
Yeah, so I was at the last cannabis industry thing at the library there a couple weeks ago. I was talking to, I think Brian, I think it was Brian. I don't know, somebody has
Brian from what's his name insurance, Chapman Insurance.
Yeah, where there's his specific niche he's looking at is developing into the cannabis industry. If we can have a really strong relationship with them, there's a chance that the underwriter can underwrite, can reduce the risk and therefore your premium will go down. I do think that that's going to require kind of a bespoke solution for a while in New York until either standards get met or there becomes a big discrepancy between businesses that are doing a good job and ones that are doing a bad job. So another way to say that would be like, in Boston, where pretty much everybody has really good security and high-end security. I don't know if it's a requirement there or what, but that's the case. The insurance is going to kind of be even across the board, but everybody's beating what the New York State requirements currently are. Where in New York State, like when it starts, there's very likely going to be those companies that pretty much just look like a unlocked 7-Eleven. And when you've got an unlocked 7-Eleven and somebody coming in with a gun, like that's going to affect everybody's premium. And if you're working with somebody like Brian and being like, no, look, we're doing all these things, and here we have a professional advisor, we have somebody we're working with at the security company that can speak to how this risk process is managed, I think it's likely that an insurance company can lower that premium.
Hey, Zach, can I chime in on that real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Kurt.
Hey, everybody, Kurt Parker here. Just want to start off real quick that I'm a huge supporter of everything that we're seeing in the cannabis industry. Seeing how the use cases of this product have helped, friends of mine, everything from PTSD on the medical side to having been a police officer on the streets and just seeing the futility and how we handle this type of substance. The trend towards legalization is exactly where we need to go. So I, for one, am excited to see this. I'm excited to be a part of it. In reference to the insurance thing, I think that one of the things that we are likely to see, and I would advise and recommend anybody consider when looking at a security provider, is do they have the expertise to sit down with an insurance underwriter and have an intelligent conversation about what risks flag to that particular underwriter the most, so that the plan that's developed can adequately assess those concerns. And that's the kind of thing that when an insurance underwriter looks at it, it comes down to dollars and cents. What is the likelihood and risk of loss that I'm facing that requires me per the contract to initiate a payout to the client or the insured business or individual, and how do I minimize my risk of having to do that payoff or payout rather. And that's where a good security plan should consider not just regional trends, but what are the concerns of all the stakeholders, whether it's the business owner concerned about, obviously their product, their property, and their personnel, or it's the bank and they're concerned about, hey, we're statistically most likely to receive catastrophic losses on this industry. A big one is during transport, as an example. So a comprehensive plan should take into account who that insurance provider is, what concerns they are most concerned about, and address them accordingly.
Thanks, Kurt. That's exactly right, and much better said than how I explained it. All right, so here I just threw in this kind of as a joke, but like here's a difference between two security guards, right? One is going to be a lot more preventative and a lot more proactive in protecting whatever they're protecting than the other. And I think that's pretty clear. And we've all seen security guards that don't, they're in a uniform, but that's the only thing that makes them a security guard, versus somebody who provides a demeanor, an attitude, a physique, and an attention that creates an actual secure environment. And this could be people. We could also be talking about cameras. We could be talking about alarm systems. It's like across the board. There's going to be a scale. And I don't think a business that only plans to do, 30,000 in revenue a week, like needs to have a $2 million security system. But at the same time, if you go with the minimum, you're gonna reap the reward of not having a quality system. And so just to talk through the system, I've got a couple slides here that go through some of the stuff that New York is asking for. And I don't know, I'll probably just skim through it because this is really just a presentation, not much of a discussion. So I was gonna have people ask questions, but I'll just go through.
We'll hold questions till the end.
Yeah. So I'll just because there's no table of contents, I'm gonna scan through and then I'll come back. So we're gonna talk about some installed security systems, the paperwork, storage, what happens after an incident, transportation, and then and cash. So installation. So this is like going to be required for anybody who's got a processing facility, packaging facility, a distillery, anywhere where you have cannabis products stored. Your facility is going to have regulated locks that it has to have, types of locks. It's going to have perimeter alarms, motion detection, video surveillance. Those video files then have to be stored. I think it's 24/7 footage for 90 days. You need to have silent alarms that are both duress and holdup. Duress is when you're going to put in a fake code when you're forced to open something or do something. Holdup is when there's a robbery currently happening. And then an audible alarm or a panic alarm that also reaches out to law enforcement. You need to have automatic dialers set up, either voice or digital, that's going to send a message to those law enforcement agencies. You need failure notification systems that are going to let you know if your system doesn't work, along with lighting and exterior.
Sorry, Zach, can I ask a question between the difference of duress and holdup for silent alarms?
Yeah, so duress is specifically something where someone forces you to type in a fake code. So turn off your alarm system, there might be a code that turns it off, but if you turn it off with a special combination, it turns it off, but it also tells the law enforcement. A holdup alarm is just a separate system that specifically silently just tells an agency that you're currently in the middle of a violent theft, of a robbery.
So duress is not notifying the police?
No, all three notify the police.
Oh, they're all notifying the police, but
Everything
in
notifies the
different
police.
Scenarios.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And then,
Thanks.
of course, with all these things, your employees have to be trained a certain way, or to a certain level. And just to keep hitting it home, like facility locks, like there's 100 different solutions for this, but any vendor you go to is going to sell you, whatever they provide, right? Whatever their preference is. In our opinion, it's often a good idea to have a third party design your security system and then work with those vendors. So like I met a couple of vendors from the Rochester area that looks like they do a phenomenal job, and I met them at the library event. It makes sense that you work with somebody who can design the security system for you, who can then press those vendors for the types of locks that are going to actually benefit your business the most. Cost efficient and preventative, easy to use, less maintenance, and some locks, and when codes are switching and you have access controls and permissioning that's going to have to happen, which is also a requirement later I'll talk about. Like having systems that are easy to train and work with and also don't totally break the bank are important. And that's really on every one of these line items. Some are really simple, motion detection, it doesn't take much as long as the people working with you are on your team and they're not just selling you a bunch of stuff. I will add that there is a kind of ambiguous requirement that everything is commercial grade. So however you define that, you don't want to be the minimum on that if you end up being held liable for some especially violent crime.
So commercial grade means like you can't use like ADT that whoever's supplying your house with.
No, you could use some of those vendors cross-platform between commercial and residential. I'd have to look more specifically at the regulation when it actually gets published. That's not a terribly uncommon thing to be specified, though, and it goes into the code for building security or building locks or building access control is different than it is for residential. So it's likely going to be code issues in terms of building code more than anything else, but a lot of the same providers have two different tracks of services, and it's just a matter of knowing which one you need to work with.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, and so on that, there's going to be a bunch of specifications like the DPI and the camera resolution, timestamps on your videos, the grade of picture, and so on. All of that, you want to lean for best practices, not minimum requirements. Backup power, so everybody's going to have to be able to, and this also includes electronic locks and transportation. You need to be able to monitor and use all of your systems, even when there's a power outage. And then you have to protect the security system itself from access, theft, loss, destruction, or alteration, meaning you have an insider threat from your own employees, and maybe even employees who are trying to protect you when something happens and they make a bad mistake going in to alter a file or change something. You have to set up systems that don't allow that to happen, because you're going to get a whole lot more trouble and you're going to get shut down for doing that versus staying compliant through and through. And then you have to, I believe it's biannually, you need to be testing, or twice annually, you need to be testing all your systems. Then you need to prove that as well, which comes to paperwork. All this stuff, everything you do in your security and compliance, you need to record and either in memos or in, they require a visitor's log, access permissions for your security, access permissions for products. Only minimum amount of employees are ever allowed to access anything at any given time. And you need to keep really good records and process for that. So everybody getting into this business, you're getting into a logistics business. There's a ton of logistics here. And if you clean it up and have a strong SOP from day one, you'll be good to go. And then you can just make it better over time. That also shipping manifests. So for storage, marijuana is going to have to be stored in approved safes. And they have to have limited access, meaning who can access and also when they can access. There's a limited time window. They should be able to access the product based on when the product is actually needed. And then if anybody here is doing medical marijuana, it also has to be protected from contamination, physical, chemical, microbial, and then deterioration as well. I don't know if that's true for the adult recreational or not. It probably is. But it's definitely true for medical. And then if you do use keys, which is likely for some layer, security is in layers, if I didn't mention that already. Having a lot of smart layers is better than having one really big door that when it's open, anybody can steal everything. So you want a lot of layers. Keys also need to be stored, like access to the tools that then get you access. You need to protect all those things. So it really is a pretty important to have a strong security plan going in. And so what happens after an incident? So one, if you're a legitimate company, you're going to be working with agencies and law enforcement. And it's important that you do that as professionally and as proactively as possible. Our recommendation, or my recommendation, is to work with those agencies before an incident happens so that everybody's on the same page. I know that's possible because I work downtown in Rochester, and I've met 4 or 5 police officers just being down there and built relationships. It's not hard, and they want you to be successful, and they want you to be the business that isn't bringing crime into wherever it is. But keep in mind that as soon as law enforcement's involved, you're going to be inspected and audited. So compliance isn't something that should just be like pushed off. It's something that has to be from day one. Because you will be shut down, and it's also likely that you're held accountable for, like, truly you personally as an owner are held accountable for your infractions.
Well, I also want to just clarify that being audited, just by the nature of you being in this industry, the likelihood of you being audited is extremely high.
Oh yeah.
So regardless of your security and safety protocols, the likelihood of being audited is very, very high. So just be prepared for that. And yeah, that's it.
Yep, 100%. And it's not a bad idea as well with your security plan to also have a crisis management process or an incident process that has the right phone numbers to call, what to say, what your team needs to be doing, what your employees need to be doing right away to make sure that anything that let's say someone breaks in and steals a bunch of things or breaks a container that has a bunch of marijuana in it or whatever, you need to make sure you're taking the right steps to correctly secure those things while also not screwing up with the crime scene or breaking any laws yourself, right? So having the right SOPs there are important. For transportation, requirements are pretty simple. Shipping manifest, you have to have locked storage compartment inside the vehicle. This doesn't have to be some big armored vehicle, but it does have to have locked storage that meets the requirements. It can't be visible. Products can't be visible in any way. Our recommendation is don't make the vehicle obvious and don't have the product obvious at all. Like, there's no reason people need to know what you're doing because you're a target. You have to stick to direct routes, and you can't stop during your travel. You need to go from point A to point B that you're meant to have. It's smart here to cover your own back, to have those routes planned, and maybe not just with your Google Maps. Maybe you have it documented in some way that this is the route that we take. And you can also shift those routes so that you have a number of different routes, so you're not always taking the same route. Randomized delivery times are huge. They're required. They're going to be required here. And we'll talk about cash on the next page, but it's just good business. There's no reason for anybody in your company, anybody, to know when these things happen, except right when they're happening and when they need to know. 2 employees per vehicle. One has to stay in the vehicle when the other gets out. That's because they're in the vehicle with the product. And then you have to have secure communications with your company while you're traveling. So cash is the big thing I haven't talked about. All these requirements that I said all have to do with marijuana storage and being in the marijuana industry and processing marijuana and cannabis. Cash is just, for now at least, an important major risk multiplier for the industry. When companies can bank freely and run Visa cards and don't need to worry about cash, this industry will look a lot more like other recreational industries like liquor or bars, right? Until then, while it's still cash, there's just a massive risk. People have been murdered. People have been kidnapped over 30 grand, 40 grand. And a lot of these businesses are going to be pushing the 50 to 100 grand per week. That's just a ton of cash.
Hey, Zach, sorry to interrupt. We've got a question from Dwayne.
Go ahead.
And maybe Kurt is currently answering that. Dwayne says, on the locked storage compartment for delivery using a consumer passenger vehicle, do we have to bolt the storage compartment of the vehicle truck?
Yeah, so I'm gonna plead the fifth on this one and just go with, if you want to give us a call separately, we can help you find that answer in the regulations, or if you retain us, we can work with you on it. But I don't want to.
Kurt, is your message to me actually for Dwayne?
Yeah, I just realized that I was
Okay.
meant to reply to you as opposed to everyone. But in short, we're going to have to see what level of specificity the regulation goes into in terms of what that lockable compartment means. Different agencies, I've seen them specified all over the place. I have not seen the one that's specific to New York cannabis yet. Short version is you have to look, number one, at what is the room for interpretation, and then compare what that policy sets as the minimum. Compare that with what's advisable. There's a bunch of different solutions in terms of sorting that out. Like if we were to consult with somebody, there's a couple ways to go about doing it. I would, just as a broad brushstroke, recommend hard-mounted containment storage. So some of the things that I've done in moving sensitive items around, obviously not cannabis, but I have moved large quantities of cash. I've moved classified materials, weapon systems, things like that. There's varying levels of lockable storage that can be mounted in to vehicles, and that's always going to be the most secure for a number of reasons. One is theft of the vehicle itself and access to that compartment. There's additional ways to secure it other than just the lock. That's one. And then the second one is fire containment. So those would be some of the things that I would be concerned about.
I'll add one additional, that I have seen fleets where the main lockable storage, again, for other items and other sensitive items, have been removable, but it wasn't like, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it was extremely hard mounted with, complicated systems where kind of like car parts more or less have to be removed in order to swap the fleet. And they do that in order to have fleets where the vehicles don't look the same every day, but you're not paying for, 10 different full systems. But that's some pretty custom stuff and things that we could get into another time.
Yeah, I've worked with plenty of vehicle outfitters on coming up with those kinds of solutions.
Yeah. All right, so cash. Cash is the major risk multiplier. It takes everything else we talked about, makes it 100 times worse. If you look up, go on YouTube and type in distillery, burglary or armed robbery or any of that, the majority of those cases are all cash based. It's people trying to steal money. And no matter what you do, if you have a company that employs people that employs people, there is a chance that there's an insider threat as well, where you're there at some point that relationship sours, and you know, controlling access and controlling the security and making it very clear and part of your culture that there's a bunch of different layers in place where nobody can control anything, nobody knows everything, and it's just really done professionally, is going to prevent a lot of the cash problems. So what do we got to think about with cash? First, you need to have a system to actually manage the cash itself, how you store it at the location, how you count it, how it's packaged. You need to understand how you can convert that cash and how you can run payroll. Most employees don't want to get paid in cash. You have to understand how to move it and then where to put it if you can't bank it. This is actually one of the few industries in the US in the last 100 years that has had to deal with this problem. Different states have solved it in different ways. In Texas, there's a bunch of banks that have come up, which are pretty much just private cash banks. And there's, you know, a fine line with federal law on what's money laundering. The term money laundering comes from washing money, like cleaning money, just like you clean your clothes at the laundromat and they're not dirty anymore. And how do we turn cash that might not be up and up into something that is? Now, New York State says this is good to go and is saying that. And then we've got a bunch of laws and policies coming, hopefully, that allow for safe banking. Until then, you need to work with companies that you can trust. So I'd just recommend doing a lot of research there, either working with a company like us that can point you in the right direction, talking to your to entrepreneurs from other states that have already gone through this and have been doing it for a long time. Read about the problems, and don't just think that you can hide 50 grand or 100 grand and you won't have sophisticated criminals trying to take it.
Well, the other thing is like I have called, so people with a federal charter for a bank obviously can't bank cannabis money because it's still illegal at the federal level. I have called every single state chartered bank in New York State, and they are not willing to work with cannabis.
Yeah, there's only 600 and there's like 640 banks in the entire US that work with cannabis. So
yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, it's there, and again, like with the issues of crossing state lines, that you're, even if like you went from New York where it's legal to Massachusetts where it's legal, you're still breaking the law by crossing that state line. So it's a very complicated, very complicated issue.
it is, and you know, honestly, we're a pretty flexible company. Pantera is, and we'd be happy to work with some of the larger, I guess, or more established entrepreneurs in our region to solve this for them. I don't know. I think there's a really big opportunity there. We're entrepreneurs as well, and we'd love to be involved. But you know, it is really complicated, and you got to be thinking about it if you're not.
That's a great point. You know, one of the things that, as I've been studying the development of the cannabis market, that I can't help but notice is how similar it is to the banking industry, both in the late 1900s, early 2000s, before we were in, you know, very largely electronic currency movement based, and then going all the way back to historically the time when America wasn't actually a nation, but a combination of colonies that all had different currency. It was very difficult to move currency that time. And so we're seeing the same thing now. And I think, and what I find really interesting is that the cannabis market, I think, is going to start from a security standpoint, very much like securing banking. You're moving an entirely physical product that's easy to intercept, easy to take, and then easy to repurpose for your own financial gain as a thief, just like the way cash trucks were working back in the day. You know, we don't see as much of that now because we've gone almost entirely digital. The times you see an actual cash truck going up to the bank is pretty rare these days. So I can't help but notice those similarities. I do think at the state level, my guess would be you'll start to see some of those restrictions or aversions to moving or working with cannabis cash to be reduced. The question will be, I think, when that happens, is what kind of percentage are they going to be looking at, knowing that they're the only game in town. You know, we have hope that in Congress that the Banking Act, one of the ones that's on the floor, will actually get some traction and pass. So I definitely think there needs to be a lobbying component so that you can remove the federal commerce clause out of moving it from state to state. And once that happens, then the banks will realize they don't have a business decision to make other than accepting the cash. But until that happens, the movement component piece of the product, and then the cash component and the banking component, they're the security problems to solve.
Yeah, the other stuff is like table stakes. You need to have, you know, professional systems and professional guards that are going to prevent problems. The highest risk piece is cash movement and product movement. They're just so easy to go after. All right, so just real quick, I wanted to talk about the process for risk mitigation that I've used throughout most of my career. There's a lot of different ways to communicate this, but I just wanted to provide the people watching a simple tool that, you know, in this case, this is based on the military ORM system. But if you use something like this and you get to the end of the process, you should have a basic plan. In any professional organization you work with to deal with your security and your risk mitigation, you should be checking and making sure they're going through some process like this, not just selling you a bunch of cameras. Again, not to disparage the vendors out there, the ones that I've met so far seem really, really professional. So the idea about the principles here is we want to accept the risks when the benefits outweigh the costs. We don't ever want to accept unnecessary risk. We want to anticipate and manage the risks through planning. And then we want to make the risk decisions at the right level. At the right level here is interesting when the majority of the people who are probably getting into this business don't have any security background and haven't ever dealt with this, which is where I would say you need to go find somebody who can provide you enough information that as the CEO of your business or as maybe your board gets involved, your board advisors, help you make the right decision and what level of risk you're willing to take to run a business that's going to last the next 50 years and that gets shut down in 18 months. So the basic process on the left of the arrow is you identify your hazards, you assess them, you make risk decisions, you then implement your controls, and then you supervise or manage. And so for that, when we're looking at risk, we look at these two different aspects. One are the severity categories, and the other is the probability of occurrence levels. So severity is catastrophic, critical, moderate, negligible. The most important here are the higher risk ones, like catastrophic. We're referring to something that not only crushes your business, but also hurts people, right? And in this case, I would include adds risk to somebody going to prison or breaking laws and being held accountable, because that ruins your life, right? And so that's catastrophic. Critical is something that's going to critically impact your business, but not maybe hurt you. Moderate is something that's going to moderately impact your business, and negligible is negligible. For probability, it's exactly what it says: frequent, likely, occasional, seldom, and unlikely. And then what you do is you take these different aspects, the severity categories and the probability of occurrence, and put them in this chart, right? Which is where you mix. If it's frequent and catastrophic, like in top left, that's an extremely high risk, and it's not worth taking. If it's, the next one over, if it's catastrophic and likely, extremely high risk. But if it's catastrophic and unlikely, maybe that's a medium risk that you're willing to take and still get into the business. That might be, for example, at a warehouse, you have really tall shelves and people have to go up on a lift. Well, if they fell off the lift, somebody could die. So it's catastrophic, but it's unlikely. And you've put in enough risk mitigation processes to move it from occasional to unlikely. So now it's a risk you can accept. So that's the idea behind this process, is you figure out where a risk currently is. Let's say it's critical and likely, so it's a high risk. You need to move that risk to unlikely. You need to move it to the green before you can move on. Before your plan is done, everything needs to be in the green, right? You need to be at low risk. If you're going to be a happy cannabis business with a bunch of cash, everything you do has to be in the low risk category. I've been doing this for a very long time. I don't know if that was useful at all, but the framework really helps me to be able to take these different categories and levels and put them on every decision that I make, so that I make the right decisions and I have a reason for those decisions. And on top of all that, they're written down. It's a process we've all agreed on.
I think that's great. It gives
That's
people a way to look at, a strategic way to look at risk.
Yep, and you can dig into this stuff as deep as you want. Every armed force has different versions of it. This is what we used in the SEAL teams for our mission planning, right? And for Kurt used versions of this for building out security protocols for different really sensitive and high risk locations across the world. All right, that's the presentation for today.
Do we have any questions? You've got two experts here at your disposal, Zach and Kurt. No questions. Okay.
If there's no questions, I'll give a little outro before we stop the recording.
Absolutely.
Nothing? All right, I'll just say, we've got the work phone number on the screen. Call that. That'll go to somebody on our team and they'll pick up. You can call my cell phone if you want. I probably should have put that on YouTube. And you can go to our website at canterassecurity.com and just learn a little bit more about what we are and who we are. But specifically, like Kurt said, we care a lot about this industry. It's had a big impact on our friends and people who've served in different ways, generally from PTSD and so on. And then we're seeing that it needs to be legal. It's becoming legal, and we're excited to help out. We're entrepreneurs, so we're willing to get creative and flexible and help the entrepreneurs that are serious about protecting their assets, their people, and building out a good plan.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Just so next week, Wednesday, August 3rd, we're going to be talking about the union agreement that will be required of you with our friends from Harder, Seacrest, and Emory. So definitely join us next week. And yeah. And that's it, I guess. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, everybody.